Good morning, this is Di and it's Vicki. And we're looking for our natural habitat. Where is it? Nope, the green awning isn't it. We're trying to find a Starbucks. We are in Virginia, near the Pentagon, and we're making our way to not what we thought. I don't know where it is. You would think Starbucks, but no, not a Starbucks. I'm a little fascinated by the fact it's supposed to be spring and we have snow. Ooh, look at this. It turned into something. Found the Starbucks.
Oh, there's ice. Oh, the ice. How cute is that?
So cute.
Lemon roll. Oh, I'm sitting. I've got to hold up my Starbucks logo, but my lemon roll is on top.
I have the little scores and hot water. Starbucks cup. Yay.
You're lucking out because the window behind you is making the picture not turn out.
Good. Didn't turn out, she says. That's good news. In my old job, I used to go to Starbucks 2 or 3 or 4 times a week, and on my new job, I don't go at all. So it's not as native of a habitat to me as it would be for other folks. Yeah. However, I can order much more quickly than a visitor. That is the Air Force Memorial. Looks really cool. We're on our way to the Pentagon Memorial. This is the Pentagon, and it has about 29,000 employees, 26,000 of which help with the defense of our nation, and then 3,000 other staff. That was a lot of people here the day that the events of 9/11 unfolded. The benches face that way if they were working in the Pentagon, and the benches face that way if they were on Flight 77. And then some have engraving here, which is the name of their family members that also perished. You can see where the brick was replaced, and there's the old brick. You can see the line. So you can see by the direction of the benches how many young people were working here in the early 20s, the day of the tragedy. And then you can see here how many children were on the flight. And there's a big gap between. So we're in kind of a quiet corner of the memorial, just thinking back to the events of that day and after. And so I was going to ask Vicki, how did you find out that the 9/11 attacks had happened?
I was on the freeway driving to work, and they'd had the first plane had hit in New York, and that came on the radio, and they didn't know really what had happened at that point, and so they thought maybe it was just like a small plane that a terrible accident had happened, and then within a short time, then the news came on that a second plane, again, I'm still in my car, so I'm just hearing this on the radio, kind of in between, it's not breaking news really at that point yet. So whatever radio station I was listening to was interrupting in between songs to say what was going on. By the time I got to work, the location I was at, people were up in the offices gathered around a TV and were watching on the TV, and that's when more information was coming through, and it wasn't clear yet what was going on. I was working at 2 different locations at that time, so then I left the Seattle location to drive to the Renton, and by that time, that's when the reports were, there was a lot of confusion at the time, and they were reporting, in addition to the planes, there were reports that there were car bombs going off, that there were things happening in DC, and then all of that was just very, very confusing. By the time I got to my other job site, again, wherever there were TVs in the building, TVs were on. Internet wasn't then what it was now, but you could log on and start to get news reports. And I don't think, and for the most part, people were just watching news and updating each other as they heard more. It was really confusing. And also at that time, they didn't know. There were fears we were on the West Coast, and that was the big fear that day, was that another round was coming to the West Coast. And so until later that day, I think there was just so much confusion and not knowing what was going on until very late in that day. I remember a friend contacted me and said, "You're not going home alone." I lived alone, and I went over to their house that night to watch when the president came on to talk about it. Again, different world at that time too, even different world in how you found out about the news. No smartphones. It was just different. It was different. Very, very sad day. Sad day and a very scary day, and an uncertain day of not really understanding. I mean, at that time, people didn't really know that much. The average person didn't know that much about the Middle East and didn't know. I think that's one of the things now. People are, it's still shocking and horrible when it happens, but you're not necessarily surprised when there's a terrorist attack. This was gut punch, because it was so unexpected. Something like that really wasn't on people's radar. And I mean, it was so just, it's hard to find the words now, even looking back.
I got up in the morning, I was getting my kids off to school, and my mom called and said, "You've got to turn the news on. Something's happened in New York. An airplane hit the World Trade Center." Well, I, of course, thought that it was like a little Cessna or something, and somebody got off course. I didn't imagine it was intentional. And so I turned the TV on, and that first tower was sort of flaming. Jerry had come home from work and he was coming in through the garage, and I said, "You gotta come see this. Something's happening with the World Trade Center." And it wasn't that dramatic at that point. And then the second plane hit the tower. And my kids are getting up to come down and have breakfast, and that was it. People started jumping out of the buildings, and that was it. We turned the TV off because you can't have your kids watching that. So they heard too when they were coming down that there was something we'd been watching, that something bad had happened. And so we turned the TV off, and it was my day to volunteer. It was a Tuesday. September 11th was on a Tuesday, and it was my day to volunteer at the school. So I went up to volunteer, and the teacher didn't need me in the classroom. She needed me in the copy room. So I was hanging out with the other staff that were working in the copy room, and we had a radio. And so we listened to the news on the radio while we were trying to figure out what happened, because like Vicki was saying, there was like sort of these rumors of other sites, and we thought our coast was one of them, and so it was kind of nerve-wracking. And so I think I stayed there almost the whole school day, and we got back, and I still didn't want to turn the TV on in front of the kids, but I wanted to know what was going on. And it was early days of the internet, and all the websites were crashing because there was so much like traffic on the CNN site and stuff, that all of those websites stopped working. They weren't designed for that level of bombardment. And so at that time, I was watching the television show Big Brother, which is ridiculous, but I had been watching Big Brother, and there was a message board, a room where we used to all go and talk about Big Brother, and they would do live transcripts of what was happening on the show, because a lot of people would watch the 24-hour feeds on Big Brother, and they would write down what happened so that we knew when we watched the next episode, oh, well, we know this happened behind the scenes or whatever. And so the same people who would transcribe Big Brother went into transcription mode with the events of 9/11, and as more news came, they were typing up, oh, we just heard this on CNN, we just heard this on ABC, we just heard this on, and so it was a constant flow of information. And so I would just sit at the computer reading text. That way my kids didn't see anything else or get exposed to anything, because they were pretty little at the time. And that was how I found out what was happening that day. When they grounded the planes, that was a big deal, because my husband makes airplanes for a living, and that's his livelihood. So we didn't know if he would still have a job. Like, the whole thing was all just chaotic, the way we were getting information, and what we knew was chaotic, and so it was all really scary and really strange, because terrorist attacks were something that happened like on a subway in Italy or something, or at a coffee shop in Europe. It wasn't anything that happened on the United States side, and so it was really shocking. And then to find out the magnitude of the event and see how many people were missing people, that was really hard. We're outside of the Kennedy Center. We're going to the place Sheer Madness.